Stamping dies are the tools that shape and cut sheet metal parts. The design and production of dies is a specialized profession in which prepared drawings are translated into stamping dies by skilled craftsmen known as die makers. These stamping dies are then mounted in presses, where sheet metal is fed to them either individually as cut blanks or continuously from coils. There, the press provides the force to close the dies where they form the sheet metal into finished parts. The term die can be confusing since it represents two different things. As a generic term, it represents the entire press tooling used to cut and form metal. However, the term die can also refer to only the female half of the tool set. The male punch mates with the female die, and working in opposition to each other, they form shapes and punch holes in sheet metal. The term die set refers to the upper and lower die assemblies, which are also called punch and die holders or shoes, as well as other components. Die sets can take many forms, shapes, and sizes. The upper half of the die set is clamped to the press ram, while the lower half is secured to the bolster plate on the press bed. The die halves are opened and closed by movement of the press ram. Guide pins sliding in matched bushings or ball bearing bushings align the upper and lower half of the die set. Basic die operations include cutting, bending, forming, drawing, and squeezing. The two most common types of dies, however, are cutting dies and forming dies. Cutting, which includes shearing, blanking, hole punching, and trimming, is the most common press-working operation using dies. Shearing is a process by which large sheets of material are cut into smaller sections. These pieces are generally used in later operations. Blanking is a form of shearing that cuts sheet metal stock around the complete perimeter of a shape to form a workpiece blank. Reference to a blank in stamping usually implies the need to perform subsequent operations to the workpiece. Punching is the cutting of a slug from the sheet metal stock to produce a hole. After a part has been formed, a trimming die is utilized to remove the excess scrap metal from the workpiece. Forming is a broad term for metalworking processes in which the shape of a punch and die is reproduced directly in the metal. Some common forming operations done with press-mounted dies include drawing, bending, flanging, and hemming. Drawing shapes a flat pre-cut metal blank by forcing it into a die cavity with a punch without excessive wrinkling, thinning, or fracturing of the metal. Various complex forms may be produced by drawing. Drawn parts may vary in size from small parts up to aircraft and automotive parts large enough to require mechanical handling equipment. Bending is performed on sheet metal to gain rigidity and to produce a part of desired shape. Bending is usually done to make structural stampings, such as brackets, braces, and supports. Flanging is a forming operation similar to bending, except that the flanged edge is shorter and narrower compared to the overall part size. A flange can be bent down along a straight or curved line and is used for appearance, rigidity, edge strengthening, removing a sheared edge, and to provide an accurately positioned fastening surface. In sheet metal forming, hemming is utilized primarily to provide a smooth, rounded finished edge and to attach sheet metal parts together. Multiple operations may be carried out on sheet metal stock either at a single die station or at multiple stations within a single stroke of the press. Dies used in single-station operations can be either compound dies or combination dies. Compound dies are press tools in which only cutting operations are done, usually blanking and hole punching. Combination dies are press tools in which a cutting operation, usually blanking, is combined with shaping or forming operations. Multiple station operations are done with dies that have several stations. Each station simultaneously performs a single step in a series of operations needed to complete a part. Finished workpieces are discharged with each stroke. Multiple station operations can be performed using either progressive dies or transfer dies. In progressive die operations, parts are made from continuous coil stock and remain connected to the stock by a carrier strip during each successive operation until the final cutoff and discharge from the die. In transfer die operations, parts are blanked before or at the beginning of the sequential operations. Mechanical transfer devices grip and move the individual workpieces from die station to die station within a single die to complete a progression of operations. With large workpieces, a tandem press line may be utilized. Parts are transferred by gripping devices from press to press, instead of within a single die. Each press within the tandem line holds its own tooling and performs specific operations to form, trim, and pierce the part. Tubular hydroforming begins with the placement of straight tubes into the die, but is more commonly begun using preformed tubes. Preforming prepares the tube by shaping it generally into form for placement into the hydroforming die. Sealing punches within the die close the ends of the tube, while the necessary fluid pressurization of the tube begins for hydroforming. This fluid pressurization typically removes wrinkles or imperfections in the tube. There are 3 surfaces at the end of a tube that can be used as a sealing surface. These are the outside diameter, inside diameter, and end surface. During forming, a combination of increased internal pressure and a simultaneous axial pressing on the tube ends by the sealing punches causes the material to flow into the contours of the die and the forming zones. Tubular hydroforming is generally divided into 3 classifications or operating techniques: low-pressure hydroforming, or LPH, high-pressure hydroforming, or HPH, and pressure sequence hydroforming, or PSH.
Finishing can be done completed before or after the assembly, and it's used generally to protect the product from various conditions, also to enhance the product's appearance. So some examples of finishing be deburring, and deburring is taking off the rough edges. So if you drill a hole in something, right at the edge of where you drill it might be kind of a rough, sharp edge. So deburring would be sort of like filing these things down or sanding them down, or scraping them or trimming them. That would be an example of deburring. Cleaning is another example, and that's removing unwanted material, and cleaning can be done using liquids to clean. So here's like an alkaline cleaning or an acid cleaning. So there's lots of different types of cleaning solutions that can be used, and so kind of depending on what the product is, you might use one of these different cleaning processes. Coating is another type of finishing, and coating is just applying material to a workpiece, and it can be mechanical coating where something is sheeted. It can be an electrolytic coating or conversion. So in this example, this is an electrostatic wrap. There is a voltage that's applied to here, and then charged particles wrap this thing, giving it an electrostatic wrapped coating. And you can do that by something called electroplating or powder coating. Painting and varnishing and staining, those are all examples. A lot of times things are painted just to protect the material from rust. So that's a good example of where paint might be used as a type of coating. Also, if you are hammering nails into your house, into your siding in your house, you might use something that's coated. This has a coating on it. It might be kind of hard to see, but this has a zinc coating. So zinc-coated nails are used to help them prevent them from rusting. Here's a regular nail that does not have zinc coating. This is a screw that does have zinc coating. So this one would rust over time, and after it rusts, it'll break down, and then it won't be strong anymore, and then your house falls down. So another finishing example is assembly, and that's putting parts together. Assembling could be temporary or it could be a permanent type assembly. If it's permanent, you might use some type of adhesive or glue. So this is an example of like a little dog jump or horse jump or something. And so there might be mechanical fastening, like screws with wing nuts if you want to take it apart for storage. If you don't need to take it apart, then you might just glue it together. So that would be kind of the situation where you might want to use permanent or temporary depending on if you need to use it for storage. And then conditioning is the last finishing example. You can condition an object, and by doing it, you might change the physical or mechanical properties. So heat is something that's often used to condition a material. Lumber for houses is often conditioned when it's put into a kiln to dry it. A kiln is just something really hot. So you dry it out so that way when the lumber is inside your house and all your walls are built, wood will eventually dry out completely. And if it does, then that beam that's really vertical and straight, if it was wet when you put it in, can start to warp. And then your walls will start to crack and bad things happen. So typically if you buy lumber from Home Depot or Lowe's or any store, it'll say kiln dried on it for that reason. Ceramics are another example where it's fired in another different type of kiln. Cement has a chemical conditioning. Over time when water's added to the powder, then the chemical process occurs and it strengthens. So these are some different types of finishing using, or of conditioning as a finishing process. And that's it.